group. I also work for Now Micro as a solutions and product manager. I have an MVP in enterprise mobility. I've probably worked with configuration manager, systems management, Intune for the better part of 10 years now. I'm not the biggest online, but I definitely do have a Twitter, so at Manage Doug. And of course, I have my cat laser picture because I think everybody needs something fun right now. Just some overview again. I normally don't do meeting recordings, but this will be recorded today. If you want to speak up, I really do love roundtable type sessions or questions and active community participation. It makes these types of remote presentations a lot better and easier. Again, last year we were doing all of this in person. Um, if you need live captioning, you can always go into the more options of your meeting and turn that on. It only will show that for you. And then at the end of every session today, we've been doing a $25 gift card draw selection. And that's usually based on participation as well. And then at the end of the day, we do have a survey, which I don't actually, I think I have it at the end of my presentation. But make sure you fill out that survey so you can be entered in for that grand prize. And then a special thanks to all of the sponsors, again, Microsoft Concurrency, Now Micro, Cyber, RBA, and Arctic Wolf for sponsoring our admin day and helping make that helping make this possible. So going back to this though, I'm going to be going over today a bit of zero trust and some common steps of how we can implement that utilizing our enterprise mobility and security licensing. If you've been in the security silo most of the day, a couple of the other speakers have touched a little bit on it. So I'm sorry if there's a little redundancy, but again, it's always good to review and go over that. If you have any questions or thoughts about it, definitely, please feel free to ask. So at a really high level, using some basic charts or basic pictures from Microsoft even, two of the main focuses that I do are around your identity and your endpoints or devices. But with a show of hands, I'm curious if anybody's really actively implementing zero trust in the environment in their environments right now. Nobody? Bueller? Can't get to them. Okay. So just as the overview then, what is zero trust? So zero trust have been throwing around like, oh, this is the model you need to get to. This is what we want to focus on. And one of the reasons is we can't really lean on our in-house firewalls as our boundaries and saying, yep, everything behind this is secure and perfect and protected. In modern IT and modern technology, that doesn't work. So the security model of the zero trust will help us adapt to complexity of our environments and help us keep managing them securely as our environments continue to change. This also allows us to embrace mobile workforce. It helps protect our users' identities, devices, application, and data at a high level going through everything. A main concept, what zero trust is again, it assumes breach and verifies every request through your identity manager. So we want to make sure that everything has a verification, everything is trusted, everything is validated as it comes through. And this, utilizing Azure and Microsoft, this happens within seconds. It's very quick. There's minimal impact to the end user unless they're compromised or they're high risk. And we'll go over some of that. And again, Microsoft's zero trust approach is based on three main guiding principles, which are verify explicitly, least privilege access, and assuming breaches. So again, looking just over the chart, our identities are, we're going to start with identity. because we do need the foundation of our environments. If you don't have anything configured with that entity yet, we need to at least set up some protections there to start with the zero trust model. And this isn't going to be a 100% model saying, yep, once you've implemented these changes, you are perfect, because you can always continue to grow security and make it work for your environment. What I'm doing may not necessarily be perfect for your environment today either. It will be scenario based, but at least it's starting points. So again, knowing the identity provider, utilizing multi-factor authentication, validating user risk. And then once we get to the device again, do we allow only corporate devices? Are we allowing bring your own device, or even unmanaged? Inventory and risk and compliance states as well, just making sure they meet a certain standard to allow access to our resources. So again, focusing with identity, a couple of the goals that we have right away are, what do we need to have a basic zero trust model? Well, for identity, we need to start doing federation if we have our on-premise identity system. So if we're still on-premise, as again, I think almost all of my clients are. I have a few that are actually all Azure AD now, which does make things quite a bit easier. But we need to have a synchronization there so the identities synchronizing. Set up conditional access for gating access and remediation where needed, and then utilizing analytics and other tools such as MCAS or the Cloud App Security Platform to improve our visibility. And by the way, the term MCAS has been used for a lot, but I only recently realized that was the short name for Cloud App Security. So if I do use any terms or don't specify all of them, please let me know. So for simplicity's sake, the main method that we usually go through and want to set up federation with your on-premise environment is, of course, with Azure Active Directory Connect. So we need a server on-premise for that. And I don't know if you can see my mouse. I don't know if that's actively pointing on there. But we utilize Azure Active Directory Connect to synchronize our identities from Active Directory to Azure AD, recommending use of password hash and seamless SSL. That gives the best user experience, and it helps us establish Azure AD as our identity foundation. Again, one of the goals is all access into our environment. We want to pass through that gateway of Azure AD. We want it to go through Azure AD to do all its validation. Another step, and they don't have that in the picture. Another big thing is, again, also applications. Part of the process of after federating will be also applications, understanding our applications, and there's a bit of discovery around that, and we'll touch on that as well. But again, utilizing hybrid identity password hash sync with Azure AD Connect, one of the quickest methods to get yourself connected with Azure AD. Now, I guess I would be curious if there's a show of hands. Thanks, Ben. Is there anybody who doesn't have, whose Azure Active Directory is still separate from their on-premise completely? So everybody in this meeting is fully synchronized? Is everybody using password hash sync? Yeah, no? Remember, there's a gift card for participation, people. Oh, that'll be fun. It's exciting, especially with how much better it is now than several years ago. Thank you. Good to know. Still Federation, yeah. Yeah, there's some cases where maybe you are still stuck that way. I am sorry if you are still using ADFS. And for people not there using Azure yet, it's a lot of fun. It's probably one of the better management tools and identity managers I've actually ever gotten to use. So, and towards the end after this, if we want to talk a little bit more about federation and methods, definitely would be open for that. So, okay. So all the reasons to use Azure AD, if you're not on Azure AD, as some of you are not, it's really easy to integrate to all the other tools out there. Core centric for our policies against users and even devices. And we'll cover. Then the only other thing I wanted to cover here before we move on, um, as I was talking about the Azure applications, so a couple other areas that would make your SSO where that becomes really important is our applications. A lot of environments haven't moved into cloud identity yet, mainly because they have so many on-premise applications. I'm sure there are legacy and very old applications that maybe work with nothing, no modern technology, but realistically, the majority of them work with Kerberos, OAuth 2, or SAML, and we can integrate those utilizing Azure App Proxy or just modern applications. Next, what we'll need to do is, again, set up our conditional access policies, have our environment synchronized. We need to start validating and making sure that our users are secure. What do? We don't want somebody manually telling users, oh, hey, Jerry, you need to go and reset your password. It looks like you might be compromised. There's ways with environments we can automate this. There's ways to flag users automatically for risk. And I'll show that with Cloud App Security. Again, with Microsoft, they have I'll just use gobs and gobs of data that come into their environment, into Azure, and they use their machine learning with your policies and always real-time evaluation of a user's signing in capability, validates their user risk, and we can control, are they allowed to sign in? Are they blocked? What do they have access to? Are they on a trusted device? Do we allow this on a untrusted device or a non-compliant device? Well, this isn't trusted, so we're going to require MFA. They have a high risk, so we're going to force that user reset. Or again, if they're trying to access something like Exchange with SMTP, are we blocking that legacy authentication if we don't need that anymore, which I hope we don't. So we'll go through some examples. I have quite a few tabs open, quite a few browsers open for these demos. So what we'll go through, conditional access, and if I can show the conditional access to block legacy authentication attempts, a little bit of Cloud App Security and how we can utilize that to help us investigate and discover applications. And then user risk, what does it actually look like? And it's really not, again, it's not a painful user experience. And a lot of the goal that I have here with is that none of this needs to be a bad user experience. Our goal is to be secure and provide that user with some ease. Accidentally close that one out when I don't need to. So I believe, let me know if you all can see that. I'm trying to keep this on my smaller, more manageable monitor because I know that higher resolution sometimes plays havoc in meetings. So of course I use Contoso Electronics or Contoso, my third incognito window that I have open for this. And this is just a demo environment. So not everything works perfect in the environment as it may in yours. This environment is running at M365 E5 licensing. So there are some features that I'll be using today that are higher license. So again, I think I made a joke earlier in Doug's session about all the admin centers, how at some point you should just have all of these pinned to your taskbar. Azure Active Directory, you can access this from your portal.azure site or again through aad.portal.azure.com. Going into Azure Active Directory, one of the first places we want to start, and of course, again, this is expecting that your environment's being synchronized. If you are only utilizing Azure AD, you can start testing with this right away. And we're going to look into some conditional access. So one of the first base policies, so I've already been making policies in here just for examples that we can show everybody. But one of the first base things that I usually recommend for MFA access, if you need, Azure has the ability to, if you are licensed, find it here, MFA, and we can actually now start turning on MFA at the top level. So again, we can configure account lockout if somebody MFAs a bunch wrong. If somebody, how long does it auto reset? I'll just say 5 minutes. Unblocked, and I'll say 5 minutes again. Let's see. Okay. So at the conditional access level, again, this is the more common one, how to trigger when should a user MFA. And I have some things noted here like MFA for all except emergency. So in my demo accounts, I have my emergency. Eric, you kind of can. Yeah, you can assign it to smaller groups. And Eric's question was, can you pare down MFA to a small pilot group for implementation? Yeah, you can target groups of users. You can target specific applications and things that would require that. And again, and we can cover a little of that. So, but my environment, again, I have that emergency account that I have set that if I accidentally brick my access, I lock everything out. At least that's how I can recover it. The other idea of this emergency account is if you're in a location that has no cell phone access, you can access your authenticator app. You can access cellular network. How do I get into my Azure environment? So usually I'm thinking there's one or two of those, depending on how we have to manage that. And then user and groups. So again, this says against all users. I have one user excluded at the moment in my demo. Cloud apps, I'm just targeting everything. So anything that goes through a cloud app, anything that's running through Azure for user authentication, I want to target. Conditions, it's on anything. So any device, it's going to do that. Now, where this gets different is if I don't care about a device platform, like where it's happening, if I just want them to always MFA, I can do that. But I could also say, well, only do that if they have high risk. So I could always configure this to be user risk. And this risk level gets built out of the security center or through MCAS. And I'm a mobile workforce at this point. I don't have a private or a static IP. So I don't have any trusted locations, but a lot of office environments to, again, help make that user experience a little bit better. We may assign like this office location is trusted, don't require users here to MFA. And that could just be, again, for your standard user account. So I don't want to, I would, as Michelle was talking earlier in her session, I would always require my global admin to MFA. I would always want my super admin accounts to somehow have to authenticate no matter what. I also don't believe they should always be global admin, but that's when I'll show you PIM a little bit later. And then grant, again, to grant access, one of these controls, we require multi-factor authentication. So having just this will require a user on a device that is not set up yet, does not have a cached account, like cached access to MFA. And let me see if I can bring that up real quick in one of my VMs. And again, you'll have to forgive me a little bit. This is why actually I'm using the full monitor, and hopefully I can just drag everything over. So the general Megan account is my main target for most of my testing. So she is a user, quite a bit of capability, but new device, say. What did I do? Capture. I don't want to capture. Type. Hopefully I did not break it with my access. I've logged into here then. Nope, weird conditional access. I don't know why it prompted that way, but I have her set up in the authenticator, and I can go ahead and improve the sign in. My VMs are doing something weird where it's like loading the screen first and then re-requesting login again. So if anybody's seen that or knows that. And then I have a few other security policies on her account, so you'll see some of this. And that's some stuff we'll go over a little bit later too, just because we can lock down our environment. But after MFA on an unknown device, I have access to my environment. If for some reason that account, we know it's compromised, we can do additional tasks to it. But let's go through and look at cloud app security real quick. Just find that URL, sorry. Okay, cloud app security. So what I really like about this is it really shows us and can give us the ability to see what our users are accessing with their accounts. This environment does not have Defender ATP in it, so some of those capabilities are missing, we'll see. But if we start going through and looking at users to investigate, there's a few users. We can see logins, what they're accessing. We go to Cloud Discovery Dashboard. We can start seeing what traffic, what's been happening recently. And I believe E3 has the basic access to this. I don't do a lot in licensing, so I'm sorry if that's wrong, but I believe E3 has that. And this will give us some basic scores like what it trusts and if there's any issues that it knows about. Should go through a lot older as well. Users accounts. So I have another test user that I want to actually investigate. Well, at last night he was a very high, oh, there he is. Yes. High risk for identity risk level at the moment. And that is another security capability that we'd actually want to automate and have a remediation in conditional access for. And so outside of conditional access, where we can start going to, and this goes into more of our identity protection. And this is, again, tied to how do we secure our environment? How are we protecting it? And when we have this configuration, we'll get information on this front dashboard just for if there's risk happening, what it thinks that risk is. There's some basics. But if we want to go more in depth, the cloud app security will help us do that. So going into the account, what was happening? Why is it marked as high severe? And it could be coming from an untrusted location. It could be Netherlands, an unknown IP, something that's not normal. So when we start going in and then looking at user risk policy, so what can we do here? What is this? So when we start targeting again, and you can target a individual or smaller group. So if you are trying to pilot this for what's going to happen. So if you want to target smaller groups, you can do multiple types of groups here. But for now, I just like doing everything. It is a dev environment, so I'm not as worried. Exclusion, I don't have any users excluded here because it's worst case for me, it's a password change. And risk level. So the risk level for all users is what do I want to trigger this? So if a user's risk level is medium and above, low and above, or only high. For password reset, I want something just medium above, automatically go out and take care of and do some basic change. And what's this going to do? It's going to allow access if they change their password. If they don't change their password, it's not going to let them log in. And that policy is on. I believe with conditional access, we can say anything not in this local IP range or in the United States, you can block all access with. I'll look at that in just a moment. That's where we can control where we allow authentication from with locations. Um, and then sign-in risk policy. If a user's sign-in is at high risk, or again, this changes, this is just my preference here. If the user sign-in is at a high risk, block access. So don't let them sign in. So again, that's controllable. This one, anything with blocking access without having them just change their MFA or re-MFA, I would probably recommend testing that thoroughly first and doing a pilot group or a small couple groups. And you don't necessarily want to do a test with just your IT department. Like that's fine for the first initial to see it, but you want to test with actual users that are able to experience things differently than what we test every single day. And again, MFA registration policy. I have everybody except my emergency account. I don't know about third-party MFA, I believe with conditional access. I thought conditional access could pass that request over to another MFA, but I haven't worked too much with that outside of the Microsoft stack there. Let's see. I can always ping, yeah, Maher has it. Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought it was, conditional access to tie it to that, because if it doesn't meet it, you can tie it to that application. So to show that identity protection though, with a account that is high risk, I find one of my browsers that is not compromised, office.microsoft Outlook. Let's see if that logs in. This account is Pradeep. Pradeep. Sign in here. Oh, apparently that is not his password. Well, that is the default password though. Do I have his account still blocked? I might have his account still blocked. So I will have to fix that user, that sign-in risk policy. Oh yeah, I did change it. Don't have it blocked there. I'll give that a minute to refresh and make sure that goes through. And then from the another thing you can do from the user risk is, again, monitoring what the risky sign-ins are. If there's anything recent, this is last 7 days, so let's check last month. It'll actually show us a little bit more what's happening. So this data, being able to populate that from just Active Directory, from Azure Active Directory, is really nice, really quick. But as always, let's go ahead and see also. I did a conditional access that blocked it. I don't think I did. No, that should all be fine. I'll try that again in just a moment. Let's go see his actual user page from here as well. And from here, we can also, if we wanted to trigger one, I could trigger one on another account by confirming a user's been compromised. It does take a few minutes usually for that to go through. I can tell them they just have to log in again on any of their applications. I can suspend the user. In Azure AD, we can also tell somebody they need to reconfigure their MFA authenticator too. That's what I get for not actually testing the Pradeep account and only using my other one. We can come back to that and I can show you a little bit more later. But if we go back into conditional access here, Oh, I have to set up a new location in Active Directory first. I haven't done that yet. But towards the end, I will go ahead and add that in. And realistically, when we have just those basic controls right there enabled for our environment, we are having users do MFA. We're having some of the identity protection in place. That right there is leaps and bounds forward for our user security. Just for some basic automation, basic security checks to make sure users aren't doing something dangerous. Yeah, for sure. Trusted location, block countries that users can't go to. I should not be logging in over in Russia or China. Um, I do know sometimes local rules, if you're trying to like block out of state, sometimes that does cause issues. Because I know sometimes through Azure, my computer, I see that I'm authenticated through another data center of Azure's. And once in a blue moon, Eric, I am a world traveler. I have gone outside of the US. I do not want to work globally when I'm on vacation. Any other questions on the user conditional access before we move on? Cool. So going in, and one of my main things that I work with a lot of clients on is endpoint manager or SCCM or configuration manager or Intune. Again, that's all Microsoft Endpoint Manager now, which I'm sure most people know because it's been a broken record. Um, that is definitely one of my main focuses here is explaining what we should do and how we need to do it. And it goes through a lot more of those configurations. But where we need to get to, we need our endpoints or our devices. And I'm somewhat broad about that. In my demo, I focus on Windows because that's the easiest one for me to showcase. I really like live demos, though they don't always work. They have to be registered or joined to Azure depending on our rules. And then um, are we only allowing access to the devices that are managed or compliant? Are we enabling our DLP? And we're not going to go through and how to do DLP necessarily, but just how to do some of the enforcements through Intune or Endpoint Manager. And then conditional access on that as well. What is the device allowed to do? Do we want to block it at a certain point? And again, most environments that are traditional, that are still out there, most of your device computers are domain joined. So hybrid joining those are perfectly fine. We want them to be seen in Intune. If you're using Configuration Manager, we can key off Configuration Manager still. But realistically now, workloads to manage devices utilizing Config Manager for most environments. Like I work with a lot of environments under 10,000 clients. Intune is very simple. It's just a couple hurdles of understanding the change of technology that we're focusing on. Yeah, another reason I guess to cover that I push so much towards Intune now, or just um, the modern zero trust is I'm not a big fan of VPN. Mainly, that's almost like a constant tunnel into your network, of course, VPN. But it's another access point for somebody that's walking in a coffee shop, that's leaves their computer unlocked at the office or at a remote office or on their kitchen table when they have friends over. There's a lot more risk there, in my opinion. Obviously, leaving the computer unlocked anyways, there's a lot of risk. But yes. Our first step again, registering and enrolling endpoints with Azure AD. That straight away, a couple of the main methods of getting a device registered. Let me bring up the portal. And we can do a lot of these controls in two different locations. So in Azure Active Directory, we have the ability to do under manage mobility. Um, Sometimes you'll see both of these and this bottom one is not right. But MDM user scope, we want all. The MAM user scope, if you are doing application management to devices that are not managed, MAM user scope is important. They're supposed to play well together, where if a device is not managed, it takes the MAM policy as precedence over the MDM policy. And that's such as application protections. So one of the first steps here, again, making sure this is enabled. If you're doing piloting or testing, you can do some and specify groups, and all your Azure groups are that you'll utilize here are based on our security groups. So we want to make sure that's what we're targeting, and we'll cover that in a little bit. Back to the slides though. One of the main methods Microsoft has for enrolling corporate devices into Intune or Endpoint Manager is autopilot. Show of hands, anybody who started playing, I'll use playing with autopilot, or is anyone actually actively using autopilot for their corporate environments, and corporate meaning enterprise, education, your actual business environment? You can put something in chat, raise your hand. So I know a few people in here and I know you're working with it. It's usually pretty quick to set up. I mean, sometimes it's a little slower, but the autopilot method is meant to be much more IT hands off, that we don't spend hours a month building new images, modifying an image, trying to micromanage what a computer is doing. This is, we want the user's experience to be basic, like a standard Microsoft experience, very similar to their home computer, but with a lot more lockdowns in the background. Again, we want a good user experience, but we don't need to micromanage every single click they have. We don't need to hide the taskbar. Again, most our users, if they have a computer at home, they are probably fine configuring Windows to what they need. Company portal, so that would be if your device is already a corporate device and hybrid joined. Otherwise, config manager, configuration designer, or for education, if you are an educator who has 30 plus hats on and you don't have time for everything, set up school PCs and Intune for education can honestly make your life a breeze. Configuration designer is also known as like Windows Image Configuration Designer or Wicked, and that's in the ADK or through the Microsoft Store, or honestly through the general Windows UI. We can just put a device and register it. And if nobody has seen that, oh, my VM is dead. Here, this one. So common basic VM setting. Ignore that my devices are not activated. That is quite okay. But what we can do is we can connect just under our Windows settings, connect work or school. And when we go through this, I can either, if I join this to Azure Active Directory, this is starting to bring the process of um, the ability to make this a corporate device. If I want this to be my personal computer that accesses work resources, I can only enroll my user account. So the Megan account that I'm logged in as or utilizing here does not actually log into this computer. This computer I'm logged in as just a local non-Microsoft account because that is best practice, I hear. So once Megan was on there, I was able to enroll in company portal and install that. And it'll show me that this device meets the basic requirements to access resources. And that is all set up and enabled through Endpoint Manager or Intune. And if you have any questions on enrollment, please let me know. I definitely work a lot in that whole area of how to even get started. And after I go through the slides, I'll go through a lot more demos and a lot more information. It's just getting through the initial meat of it. And I'm sorry, it is mid-November and somebody just turned on their lawnmower in Minnesota. I guess it must be above 32 degrees. So setting up next steps. So after our device is enrolled, we have that enrollment set up. We need to make sure our device is set up for compliance and to be compliant. And we need to make sure those endpoints are going to be managed correctly. And we can micromanage these groups with multiple types of dynamic security groups in Azure. They get a little complicated because the guide's not always there. I'm happy my headset drowns out the lawnmower noise. I'd be very disappointed if all my calls heard that. The side chat kind of going through that is working from home has made me really appreciate the idea of quiet devices or like electric lawn appliances, such like lawnmowers, because I'm pretty sure my neighbor every day at like 8 a.m. or either 9 a.m. when I start my calls, mower kicks right in every week. But depending on the device groups, so if we have like HR devices or financial devices, things that are far more high risk, we can actually lock those down with a more stringent compliance policy. And then again, utilizing conditional access is going to be core here for our devices just to verify and trust that computer. So back to the demos. Where am I? So we have our MDM set up there. All my wonderful portals. Endpoint Manager is the next one. So at the top level of Endpoint Manager, has anybody not actually been out to Endpoint Manager or seen this environment yet? And no judgment. It's okay if you haven't. If you want to raise your hand or nope, everybody has. Okay, so admin.microsoft. No, you don't do management there. So at the top level, again, when I'm talking about our devices and enrollment, we do have that ability to configure our automatic enrollment through Endpoint Manager, similar to Active Directory there. This is also where we will handle autopilot configurations, user enrollment capabilities. Can they enroll one device? Can they enroll Windows devices? Another recommendation for our user security and experience, I'm pretty sure no one's shocked to hear passwordless is kind of the way to go. It's more secure for our environments. So having Windows Hello for Business, we usually want to do enabled or disabled. If we don't want to use it, we want to disable it. If we do leave it not configured, our settings will not be adjusted. So if it's configured and controlled by somewhere else, we won't be, we'll just want to leave it as not configured. So enabled, we can say it requires a TPM pin length here. We can do more granular settings later on too. Don't have to touch too far into the enrollment status page or CNAME at the moment. And then devices, this is just where we upload our environment and our devices. We have Apple, Android. We have other environments, other configurations to get those enrolled through either like Apple Depth or the Business Manager. Enrollment restrictions is really important. So device type restrictions, this is probably an issue I've run into at every environment I have. I'm fine with us onboarding personal devices. Like my home desktop is probably in 10 to 15 Azure AD tenants as just a registered computer object because I have accessed resources there, and that's okay. But a lot of environments accidentally allowed users to join their devices and have them MDM, like Intune managed, without really a knowledge around that, because some settings were enabled before they were ready for piloting that. So usually when we're first starting out, I want to make this page seen because we can do what you certain users that are allowed to enroll different types of devices. I can say a version is allowed to enroll. I can block personal enrollment so my home desktop could not accidentally be managed by Intune, but it could be registered, and then it could follow application policies. And then all devices, all users, this impacts. And then the other one is device limit restrictions. There's not really, I don't often see a reason to limit our devices. So normally the default of 15 is fine. I think Active Directory is actually 5 each user ID can join. It's been a while since I've reviewed that. But if you want to change how many devices a user could join, it's under the enrollment. And that's across all platforms. So Windows, Apple, Android. Um, and we could have different groups. We could have IT with 15 devices, marketing with 1 device or 2 devices. Once we have our devices enrolled, we have to do our compliance. And one of the things around compliance is I personally don't think it's as thorough as I may want. Because sometimes when I'm thinking about compliance, I think about configuration manager or baselines or even like the model of desired configuration. Just because it's like, well, I want you to be this way. If you're not this way, I want you to fix that and report it. Where this policy does only some basic reporting. So if we do Windows 10 and later, so I'll just say default Win 10. I guess not default, but secure Win 10. And device health. So I can say that computers, they do require BitLocker. And if maybe I have a fleet of devices that do require BitLocker again and ones that don't, I can have different groups that would go that route, or even users. I could do a user-based one where this user, if they log into this device, they are not compliant for it. Require secure boot to be enabled on the computer. Yeah, usually I do all of these. Device properties. I wish I could do kind of a N-1 here or N-2 for like Windows versionings. But for the most part, this is a manual where you could put in the Windows OS version, say you only want to allow 1903 and above. Configuration manager compliance. If you are using config manager compliance and you have it tying up into Intune for more of this, and the device is co-managed, we can actually do require compliance from config manager. System security, mostly mobile device here. Few though, because I know a lot of people have that Windows 10 mobile. Defender ATP, my demo won't go too far into Defender ATP, mainly because it doesn't have that licensing here. But the purpose of it is this is more of a dynamic health, just like that user risk score. We actually can do device risk score, and I will show. Actually, yeah, I'll log into another environment to show you a little bit of what that device risk score is. Like if our Defender endpoint, like our Defender ATP, sees an issue in the environment, it can say, well, this might be malicious. Let's raise this to a low risk or a medium risk. And we can key off that for actions, like blocking that device's access to work resources. then, so I'll leave that not configured in this environment. And what I really do like about the compliance policies though is we can change what happens. So at 0 days, when do we want to mark devices non-compliant? So we can do a grace period. Well, the device just joined up, give it a day for the user and IT to maybe synchronize and fix it. Usually I'll do 0 days, so immediately that device is non-compliant. We can also, after 1 or 2 days, have it send an email to the end user. We do have to have some of that configured, of course, and we can custom write what that email has information said. We can't make it not email that user to, like, it always has to, if we have it on emailing, it does always email the user of the device that is marked as non-compliant, but we can CC things. So if we have like a IT group that should remediate it, we could also CC the IT department or the service desk that would remediate that and be like, user's device is non-compliant. We could do a few follow-ups again, like after 6 days. Worst case, let's just go ahead and after 14 days of non-compliance, kill it. Retire it from the environment so it won't have access anymore. It'll remove all the work information from that device. Questions on that compliance at all? I already have one made here, so I don't want to manipulate that too much for demo purposes. And then when devices are non-compliant, we can have them come in here and again, retiring them and removing them. And then if a device has no compliance policy, what do we want that to do? Do we want that just to be okay, or do we want to mark that not compliant? Usually I'd say mark it as non-compliant. How often does that device have to check in to revalidate itself? 14 days, 7 days? This is, again, varies to the environment. If a device is offline for a long period of time, it might be 30 days. But this is more endpoint manager wide. So this isn't per security group here. But this we can do much more granular with these reports for the compliance. And as we start going into more of the device, where it starts mattering is our conditional access. And again, just like Active Directory, I have my conditional access node. So I can technically work on some of the other access or work across what my devices are allowed or not allowed to do. So again, non-compliant devices. I don't have this one enabled because I have lockdown modes. Okay. So right now, all users, if they are trying to access certain applications, so maybe I want certain applications to be required from, like, yeah, I want this department, they can only access these applications on a corporate device or a device that's MDM managed and trusted and compliant. We can really lock down to certain applications, and those applications can be any of the cloud apps that we register or manage. So, like, I don't really know. I have too many examples at the moment, but Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, I guess, are some of the common ones people might try to lock down that we don't want access out of. It's another way to say where they can control from. Register and perfect. And keeping it very, very basic and not too complicated here, um, the device is required to be marked as compliant. We could also have one where we aren't leaning into compliance so far, but we're requiring a device to be hybrid Azure AD joined as well. So that would be joined into Azure AD. So, and one of the reasons I actually have that one turned off is for a little bit more granularity and other controls. I'm okay with users logging into a device, but there's maybe applications as I was showing earlier, to block if they're not compliant. And this is device states. So if the device is not hybrid Azure AD joined or marked as compliant, this is, I know it's in preview, but it does seem to work pretty well for that device state of saying all devices in Azure AD, one of these has to be one of those. And then conditional access, block downloads preview, or block other access capabilities. So I could allow certain apps still, but then they couldn't download information or they couldn't access certain things in that sense. So I'll go ahead and turn this one on. Let me see if my VMs are working. So this machine is not compliant. Windows should be activated because this user is licensed. Let's go ahead and try and access Outlook. Do I have Outlook on here? We will give that a moment. Apparently my device is not compliant. And I am logged in with Edge. So due to its compliance, it is being blocked from getting to certain points that I have specified. And this might be bigger for like personal computers. If you don't want employees using their home desktop or home laptops to access resources, we really can lock all of this down utilizing some conditional access policies and even app policies. And then I do have, as another VM I was showing earlier, let me find where it is. Again, hopefully I haven't and this is also why I have my emergency account, because if I ever make it too strict, it'll lock me out of everything if I actually type things in. So again, access to Microsoft Exchange Online is being monitored at the moment. Do I want to continue through this? This device is a corporate join machine and allows me to access it. I have a personal device that I tried logging in with as well to Exchange or Outlook. And again, this device is compliant, but this application has information that is not allowed on this computer because it is not corporate joined. And there's a lot of variation on what this can be. And going back to the whole, well, you should test to see if it fits what you need. I lean back on that because as you start going through and testing functionality or playing with functionality, do small groups and we can see how it reacts in our environment. Let me see if Pradeep will work yet. No, Pradeep is still not working, so I will just go to my other account that I know is set up for this. Firm compromised. It will probably block her from everything now too. So continuing on this, before I actually jump back into other privileged access, let me pull up my other environment to showcase the security center. And this is different licensing again. It's usually why I don't have it all built in here, because even most of the demo labs I utilize don't have it. But security center, Defender or Microsoft Defender for endpoint. We do a general overview. This is tied to my Intune environment or endpoint manager environment. Devices are being enrolled into here at the moment. But we can go through and do incidents, device inventory, and we start seeing risk level. So most devices here are running fine. They don't have any risk or anything too worrying. Where we start having risk though is this computer did something that might require it to be locked down. So I could have Intune have a flag on this that would make it not compliant. And that's actually one of the more exciting things we get into when we start tying more of the resources around into Azure and tying this into a SIEM then and utilizing cloud app security. And I'll just use the general term of analytics to help us manage our environment in a more secure method. But yeah, I just wanted to show that because that is a possibility to actually have that do based off the endpoint risk level. I am going to check real quick on my other user to see if her account will work now. MFA is set up. All the authentication to use. So I have a conditional access that is actually blocking our user with that risk level then. So I have to go find that and fix that real quick. And if I wasn't careful and didn't have an emergency account that I have here, I would now be locked out of my Azure tenants. So good to have. Azure Active Directory. Security. Might have to look into that. I don't know why, because it should only require them to re-MFA or reset the password. Not quite sure why it would be blocking them there. Let me see. Only other one I have is that's not it. Oh, I'll look into that a little bit more later. I don't need to spend too much time there right now trying to understand what I broke. So the next thing when we start going through a few of the last security points, so um, continuing with Intune, other areas we need to make sure our environments are being patched would be considerations for like again, as I was stating earlier, would be DLP. We want to enable those policies as much as we can. On most of the Microsoft guides they have still, they're recommending just using some of their built-in profiles. So if we go to Windows, yeah, I don't know why I can't find that now. Let's see, I'm in the right tenant. Sorry, for some reason I cannot find what because it's on, I'm looking not to the left. So where they're recommending is actually going through and using one of the baselines. Oh, and they actually just recently updated again. So with Windows 10 security baselines, some of the basic settings here, basic configuration. Again, if you want to do testing, a baseline from Microsoft is kind of their recommended stopgap. And here's just your initial set of policies to throw down on a computer. And we can do some configurations here. Doing application management though, so what they recommend for just starting the DLP stuff would be block app installations with elevated permissions on the computer, control over installations, and game DVR, so recording. They don't want you to be able to record over certain things. And this could vary per, again, groups. So not every, maybe there's certain groups that need this. Having BitLocker on and everything configured. And there's a lot of settings through here. This is again like really going through how a Windows device is going to respond with its configurations. Endpoint detection and response. There's this would be tying that into the endpoint, the Defender ATP environment. And that's again down here as well, tying this over. This environment again is not able to synchronize to that due to licensing. But other areas that can tie into your device risk score if you are utilizing that, where it's important for us to monitor and manage, um, will be under our Windows environment. We need to make sure our devices are being patched. So we do need to make sure we have an update ring going on them. Usually, again, semi-annual channels, the standard. And we would do multiple security groups depending on our ring deferrals. But this is one of the core components to make sure our devices stay up to date and secure. Just checking how much time I have. The last few things I wanted to cover, though, we'll go back to Azure Active Directory, will be under some identity governance, actually. So one of the main ones is privileged identity management. And this may, again, this is maybe a stretch for initial configurations. Something that's really great about this is it allows your user not to always have that privileged access. So my account, I don't always want to have an account that is a global admin that's always active in an environment. Maybe my Intune administrator account shouldn't always be active unless I need that capability. And if I do need that capability, I can assign a role to that account, and the user would have to come in here then and request, hey, I need this permission for several hours, and here's the reason code. It helps us actually do a lot more like actual proper access to environments. I know a lot of corporate environments, when I have an administrator account, I'd have to either reset every couple hours or depending on the access it had once an hour. I would have to go in and request privilege to that account. And we always use third-party tools, and there are good ones out there. If you do have PIM in your environment, it does work well, and it's a way to step into that. The only other thing then in the deck that I should go through would be the just like what is considered just enough access. And realistically, what that is, it's just giving advice. It's like if you have front end workers or kiosk devices and users, what access do they need? We don't need to allow them, so we can set up conditional access policies to control where they're where they're able to access their resources from. Most of these policies seem very similar, and sometimes it's only one or two button clicks different. But these are additional things that we should be configuring in our environments when we're doing conditional access to help us lock down our environments. And just let's see. If I remove that. And it's quite a bit of information to go through, but I did want to show just at least that within a few hours you could get somewhat of a demo going or examples going even in an environment, and start playing with that if you have a dev environment. I know some people in here do have dev environments, which I couldn't recommend enough if you can get access to those. If you're not, again, small security groups, but most people should be able to get access to one. With about 10 minutes left, are there any other questions or anything that you'd like me to cover a little bit more? No, I appreciate that, Jason. Eric, if you want to come off mute, you can come on mic. You know I prefer a chat.
Yes. So what are some of the trip ups that you've seen involved for those folks who've been trying to implement the words, sorry, like a zero trust type setup? Hold
on, let me find my VM again.
What was that?
On my VM again, where my user's locked out right now. Some trip ups,
and then I was gonna say,
misconfigurations.
how would you suggest overcoming them or the proper path to take?
Baby steps with testing. So I usually like the idea of whiteboarding out, like, what do we need? So this is usually not just the discussion of our IT, but we need to make sure it does understand the business side of our environment. We don't want to break business. Some of us people in IT, we do get a little excited with new technology and be like, oh, let's implement everything right now and do it. And it looks really fun, but then a day later, our CISO, or maybe not CISO, but an executive is down because they're locked out of their account for some reason that they didn't know. So it's the whole probably process. We want to make sure that we plan it out properly. So working with all of our IT teams and any of the business that it could impact.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.